Amigas, amigos, bienvenidos a Cómics XXI. Yo soy Marcos Ordóñez y hoy vamos a dedicar el vídeo a la personalidad más destacada del cómic underground americano en los años 60 y 70. Estoy hablando de Robert Crumb. Además de nuestro reportaje sobre Robert Crumb, incluimos también extractos del documental de 1994 Crumb, de Terry Swigoff, un documental que contó con el apadrinamiento del mismísimo David Lynch. Muy bien, amigas, amigos, espero que disfrutéis del vídeo y nos vemos muy prontito. Adiós. Años 60. Los cómics underground nacían en editoriales pequeñas o autoeditados. Su objetivo era saltarse el Comics Code de los cómics, que eliminaba la libertad de expresión de dibujantes y guionistas. El Comics Code se creó a raíz del caso ECE, en el que se dictaminó que sus contenidos provocaban la violencia juvenil. Los cómics underground no tenían problemas en tratar historias con sexo explícito, violencia y drogas, contribuyendo a la creación del concepto de contracultura. A finales de los años 70, el cómics underground entró en decadencia por falta de nuevas propuestas, y el relevo lo tomó el que sería conocido como cómic alternativo, tocando temas similares pero con un nuevo enfoque, una nueva experimentación. Se rechazaba el cómic comercial, el cómic convencional, el cómic de superhéroes. En el cómic alternativo desarrollaron la parte principal de sus carreras Art Spiegelman, Peter Bagge, Daniel Clowes, Chris Ware, los hermanos Hernández y editoriales como Dark Horse, Image Comics y Oni Press. Robert Crumb nació el 30 de agosto de 1943 en Filadelfia. Sus orígenes eran ingleses y escoceses. Es el creador de muchas de las obras clave del cómic underground americano en los años 60 y 70. Creó la revista Zap Comics y personajes como Mr. Natural y Fritz the Cat, donde los temas eróticos y pornográficos eran muy frecuentes. Crumb perteneció a una familia de 5 hermanos. Charles y Maxon han sufrido enfermedades mentales. Robert, Maxon y Charles dibujaban inspirándose en los dibujos animados de los años 20 y 30. Charles, el hermano mayor, fue una inspiración para la creatividad de Robert Crumb. El dibujante se casó con Dana Morgan en 1964. Viajaron por Europa con muy pocos recursos y en ocasiones Dana robaba comida. El matrimonio tuvo un hijo en 1968, Jesse, pero la relación familiar era ya muy inestable. En 1965, Crumb publicó en Help, la revista de Warren que dirigía Harvey Kurtzman. También en 1965 empezó a colaborar con la revista Cavalier, una publicación en la línea de Playboy. Allí publicó Fritz the Cat. En Cavalier estaban también Baum Bode, Art Spiegelman y el ilustrador Robert McGuinness. Tras sentirse muy disgustado con su matrimonio y su trabajo, Crumb empezó a tomar LSD. En ocasiones se quedaba colgado durante meses. De esas épocas nacerían personajes como Mr. Natural o Angel Food McSpade. En febrero de 1968, el editor independiente Don Donahue contó con Crumb para la creación de su revista Zap Comix. Tenían pocos puntos de distribución, así que la esposa de Crumb vendía la revista en la calle en un carrito de bebé, donde llevaba los números de Zap Comix. Clay Wilson era un dibujante de cómic underground en una línea muy dura, que inspiró a Crumb para expresarse con total libertad en sus cómics al no tener ningún control de la censura. Wilson fue uno de los artistas más destacados de Zap Comix, en la que también dibujaron Víctor Moscoso, Gilbert Shelton y Rick Griffin. Zap Comix fue un éxito de ventas y abrió un nuevo mercado. A principios de los 70, Crumb vivió una época de mucha producción. De estos años es su tira Keep On Tracking. En 1981, Crumb lanzó la revista Weirdo, editando 9 de sus 28 números. En 1991, el dibujante y su segunda mujer, Aline, se mudaron al sur de Francia. Crumb no soportaba vivir en los Estados Unidos. Entre 1987 y 2005, Fantagraphics publicó toda la obra completa de Robert Crumb, un total de 17 volúmenes. Crumb siempre ha recibido críticas negativas por la visión estereotipada que da de la mujer y de los afroamericanos. Crumb comentó que la caricatura racista formaba parte de la cultura americana en la que se crió. Además, en muchas ocasiones habló de su hostilidad hacia las mujeres.
If I don't draw for a while, I get really crazy. I start feeling really depressed and suicidal if I don't get to draw. But then sometimes when I'm drawing, I feel suicidal too. So.
What are you trying to get at in your work?
Jesus. I don't know. I don't work in terms of conscious messages. I can't do that. It has to be something that I'm revealing to myself while I'm doing it, which is hard to explain. Which means that while I'm doing it, I don't know exactly what it's about. You just have to have the courage or to take that chance. You know, what's going to come out? What's coming out of this? I enjoy drawing. That's all. It's a deeply ingrained habit. It's all because of my brother Charles. I start with this one because it's probably the thing that I'm most well known for in the world. And I could see it for a long time on truck mud flaps. And I don't know why it caught the popular imagination, caused me nothing but headaches for 10 years after I drew it. Lawsuits and IRS problems. It was a nightmare just because of this stupid keep on trucking. So don't anybody ever come up to me and say, hey, R, keep on trucking. This is probably the next thing I'm most well known for. I'm just trying to hook you into who I am here. This sold millions of copies. I got $600 from CBS Records in 1968. And they kept my artwork. They stole my artwork. Those bastards. And I heard recently that the original of this sold at Sotheby's for $21,000. This is the third thing I'm the most well known for. Because this was made into a major full-length animated cartoon, which was an embarrassment to me for the rest of my life. And I have to say, I had nothing to do with the cartoon. I didn't want them to do it. I thought they were schlockmeisters, and they just rolled right over me. So I had this character killed in a later story I did. I had a female ostrich stab him in the head with an ice pick.
When I first met him, he never talked. He just drew the whole time. He was catatonic, and the only voice he had was his pen. He was very productive, but he was really, my mother thought he was retarded when she met him. She said, some people like cripples, some people like retards. What could I say? And
she thought I was a real creep when she first met me.
But since we lived in one place for a long time, and he's known the same people for a long time, he's more comfortable. He's a little bit more communicative, but still, he clams up. He really gets stilted in his conversation around anybody he doesn't know really well.
That's why it's such an exciting subject for a movie.
Right.
My earliest sexual memories, well, I remember being 4 years old and getting erections. I think it was my aunt or my mother's sister, and kind of humping her legs and her shoes under the table. And I remember going in my mother's closet, and she had these cowboy boots that she wore when it rained, and humping those in the closet. And I remember singing while I was doing it, singing, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. When I was about 5 or 6, I was sexually attracted to Bugs Bunny, and I cut out this Bugs Bunny off the cover of a comic book and carried it around with me, carried it around in my pocket, and took it out and looked at it periodically, and it got all wrinkled up from handling it so much that I asked my mother to iron it on the ironing board to flatten it out, and she did, and I was deeply disappointed because it got all brown when she ironed it and brittle, and it crumbled apart.
What's it about Bugs Bunny?
I don't know.
It's exciting. I
don't know. I had this sexual attraction to cute cartoon characters. You tell me. I don't know. That all changed when I turned 12, when I became fixated on Sheena. Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. TV show around 55, 56. I became totally obsessed with Sheena and just went to bed every night thinking about things I wanted to do with Sheena. So this strip, I'm talking all about my problems with women, starting with high school, where I learned a lot about women because there was this guy named Scutch, this guy here, who was kind of this mean bully, but he was also very charming. And all the girls liked him. He was the dreamboat, but he was also a bully. And my brother Charles was one of the guys he singled out for particular attention. And he had this gang of flunkies that hung around with him, this guy Scutch. So I just remember this scene where Scutch punches out my brother in the hallway at school. It was a very sad sight for me to see. Charles gave up trying to be popular or have girlfriends or anything after everybody saw that he couldn't fight back. He was beat up by When I was 13 and 14 and trying to be a normal teenager, I was like really a jerk. I mean, I tried to, act like I thought they were acting. It just came out all wrong and weird. So then I just stopped completely and just became a shadow. And I wasn't even there. No, people weren't even aware that I was, in the same world they were in. And that kind of freed me completely because I wasn't under those pressures to be normal. So I got interested in old-time music and went to the black section of town knocking on doors and looking for old records and things like that would be unthinkable if you were going to be a normal teenager. Starting about age 17, I started being driven by that obsession that I'll go down in history as a great artist. That will be my revenge. This is my image celebrating Valentine's Day. February 13th, 1962. I decided to reject conforming when society rejected me. I've heard all that be yourself stuff. When I'm myself, people think I'm nuts. Guess I'll have to be satisfied with cats and old records. Girls are just utterly out of my reach. They won't even let me draw them. Yeah, all that changed after I got famous.
I think Crumb is basically, he's the Bruegel of the last half of the 20th century. I mean, there wasn't a Bruegel of the first half, but there is one of the last half, and that is Robert Crumb, because he gives you that tremendous kind of impaction of lusting, suffering, crazed humanity in all sorts of bizarre gargoyle-like allegorical forms. He's just got this very powerful imagination which goes right over the top a lot of the time, but it very seldom lies. The tradition that I see him belonging to is essentially the one of, graphic art as social protest, social criticism, which, of course, has extremely long roots and goes back to, there are elements of Goya in Crumb. Goya's sense of monstrosity comes out in those menacing bird-headed women of Crumb's, for instance.
Looks like the undergrounds are alive and well. Whole industry sprung up. They still reprinting the early ones, number 2, number 4. God only knows how many of those have been printed by now. So I guess
and explode. It's called Puke and Explode.
That's new.
These kids today.
I don't know about these kids today. So I guess you really started all this. I mean, you created this whole thing. You're responsible.
I don't like to take credit for that done, but...
Well, some of this stuff I know, yeah, nobody would, but... Hey, Robert, I'm a really big fan of yours. I'm wondering if there's any chance I can get an autograph from you.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't believe in giving autographs.
Okay, well, thanks, Sam. Have you, when are you actually moving?
Couple months.
Couple months? Wow.
France isn't, perfect or anything, but it's just slightly less evil than the United States, I think. But that's not why I'm moving, of course. Talk to my wife if you want to know why I'm moving.
We do have something here that we wanted to show you, though.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, 1967 rock concert poster.
Extremely rare item.
Yeah.
It's my only rock concert poster I ever did. There's this legend that I keep hearing all the time. People telling me, somebody told me you used to live with the Grateful Dead down here in the Haight-Ashbury, and you hung around with Jerry Garcia. And I never had anything to do with those guys. I hated that music. I went to a couple of those rock concerts and just fell asleep. It was kind of completely boring. It was psychedelic music.
It's called Old Mammy Baby
This is where I get recognized more than any other place in the world. Still is on Haight Street.
Amazing.
I know. These are my people.
Yeah.
People come up to me and say, Crumb. Sometimes some guy will come up and sit with me and chew my ear off about all his hopes and dreams. Because usually it's just some like broken down hippie pest guy. You know, it's never like a beautiful young 20-year-old girl or nothing, you know. It's just so interesting to come down here and draw people. It's the main reason I come here, just to watch people. A girl was sitting in here one day, beautiful girl. And I drew this other girl, and she came out and wanted the drawing, so I cut it out, gave it to her.
Good way to meet girls.
Right. I drew this girl, and she invited me to her house.
Wow.
Unfortunately, she wasn't very attractive.
You kept the picture, I see.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of ironic that you're so identified with the 60s, but at the time it didn't seem like you really fit in with that whole flower child.
God knows I tried. I used to come up here every day and try and be one of them. And you know, my main motivation, of course, was, you know, get some of that free love act, you know,
Right,
of course, but I wasn't too good at it. People would ask me, are you a narc? People would move away from me at the love end. I look the same as I do now, basically.
Exactly, yeah. You're, in fact, you know, you did have kind of a costume, but it wasn't like the same kind of costume.
The right costume. I remember Janis Joplin giving me this piece of advice. She said, Crumb, what's the matter with you? Don't you like girls? I said, of course I like girls. What do you think? I said, well, look, just, you know, let your hair grow long and just get one of those like satin billowy shirts, you know, velvet jackets and bell bottoms and platform shoes. You'll do all right. You'll do okay. I just can't. I couldn't do that. The whole thing was just too silly to me. I couldn't get with it, you know.
This is a real beautiful one. We should get good draw. The work in this book, the art, the feeling is what made me fall in love with Robert. The way he saw colors and the way he saw women. When I was 17 years old, I looked a lot like that. So I was what he had been drawing. I was the embodiment of what he had been drawing for years. It's such a sweet, romantic vision of things. He did this book. It took him, I think, a year. And that was his life. And he had just finished the book, like days before we met.
You know, my parents were always fighting all the time, and I used to say, I'm never getting married. And my father said, you'll marry the first one that comes along. He was right.
Robert always had a sketchbook or two going, and nothing. He was constantly drawing. If we were in a restaurant, he'd draw on the placemat. If we were on the bus, he'd draw on his bus.
There were all these hippie underground papers starting up in 66, 67. Every town had one or two of them. And they would print anything if it was related to the psychedelic experience or the hippie ethics. So I started submitting some of these LSD-inspired comics that I'd been doing in my sketchbooks to these papers, and they liked them. And then this guy came along who suggested I do a whole issue of his paper. It was called Yarrow Stalks. So I did that, and that went over big. So then he said, well, listen, why don't you just do psychedelic comic books, and I'll publish them for you. So I set to work, and I did 2 whole issues of Zap Comics.
Was incredibly exciting and incredibly hot. I mean, there were just really a handful of us doing this new form of comics, and what he was doing was just more innovative. than what any of us had even thought of.
It was fun to be a part of that and to see Zapp suddenly everywhere. From this concept of Roberts, this fantasy of doing his own comic book with a glossy cover and actually printed, to seeing it start turning up in all the windows on Hay Street, windows around town, hearing people talk about it, having the other artists show up at a certain point and wanting to be a part of it. And it happened very quickly. It seems to me, in retrospect, it happened in a matter of weeks.
Generously gave the ownership of Zapp to all the artists. There basically was no editor. There was a certain point where it seemed as though underground comics could kind of get into the big time, and Crumb always seemed reluctant to push that sort of thing.
They were offering him $100,000 just, off the top of the bat there, just to start talking. And Robert turned it down in 2 seconds. Actually, he turned it down. Aileen screamed in the background, "What are you doing, Robert? We need money."
Forget it. I'm going on Saturday Night Live. The Rolling Stones want me to do an album cover. A couple other deals like that. I don't know.
This is not something you see every day in America, where selling out is kind of everybody's ambition.
After about a year of recognition and all the bullshit of fame and all that, I just said, fuck it. And I just started drawing the dark part of myself again in the comics, which I'd always kind of kept hidden before.
I was used to what he had been doing, which was really quite sweet. And then he did this one that was just incredibly hostile to women, very sexually hostile, and I wasn't expecting it, and I was really shocked and just taken aback, and really just kind of like whack. It's hard for me to believe that he can't just channel himself into doing better work.
I like a lot of his work, and certainly I don't miss the satirical aspect of it. But then I find myself having a completely different reaction, perhaps one of being really turned off and disgusted. And, this cartoon, Joe Blow, is one that I thought about a lot in that light. On the one hand, it's a satire of a 1950s, the healthy facade of the American family, and it kind of exposes the sickness under the surface. But at the same time, you sense that Crumb is getting off on it himself in some other way. And on another level, it's an orgy, it's a self-indulgent orgy. In a fantasy, and the fantasy, specifically this story is a story about a father who commands his daughter to give him a blowjob, and she does, and they wind up having sex, and the little sort of Leave It to Beaver type brother character comes running in and sees the father and the sister, and he's shocked and upset, and he goes running to the mother to tell her, and Mom comes out of a closet wearing sort of S&M kind of getup, and the little boy says, "Oh, cool," and the next thing, Mom and son are having sex, and the whole cartoon ends with the parents saying, "Gee, we should spend more time with the kids," or something like that. Very funny. So, you read something like this, and I think that it has gone over the line from satire of a 1950s hygienic, family in denial, into something which is just Crumb producing pornography. And I think this theme in his work is omnipresent. It's part of an arrested juvenile vision.
Crumb's material comes out of a deep sense of the absurdity of human life at a certain kind of psychic level. There aren't any heroes, there aren't any villains, there aren't any heroines, and and even the victims are comic. And I think it's this which people in America find rather hard to take, because it conflicts with their basic feelings, that sort of mixture of utopianism on one hand and puritanism on the other, which is only another kind of utopianism, which has given us the kind of messy discourse that we have today. So naturally, Crumb, like all great satirists, is something of an outsider in his own.
This is fucking raging. epithet music coming out of every car, every store, every person's hand. They don't have noisy radios, they got earphones on like motherfucking cocksucking son of a bitch. A lot of aggression, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. Everybody walks around wearing, they're walking advertisements. They've got advertisements on their clothes, you know. They're walking around with Adidas written across their chest, or, 49ers on their hat. Jesus. It's pathetic. It's pitiful. The whole culture is one unified field of bought, sold, market researched everything. It used to be that people fermented their own culture. It took hundreds of years and it evolved over time, and that's gone in America. People now don't even have any concept that there ever was a culture outside of this thing that's created to make money. Whatever's the biggest, latest thing, they're into it. You just get disgusted after a while with humanity for not having more kind of like, intellectual curiosity about, what's behind all this jive bullshit,
Women go around feeling victimized by men all the time. They feel like the men have the power, and the area where women can take the power from men is through sex. Men, because they have that fetishistic twist to their minds, because they have that ability to concentrate on one thing to the exclusion of all else, can really be manipulated sexually, where women are not as susceptible.
You are so frightening. Women are susceptible to power. That's what I find. Any display of power, and he's so interesting. Gee, who's that man over there who's being so obnoxious and arrogant? He's so interesting.
I'm a career pornographer. I've been at it for 16 years, and it was really, I think, what I was always destined for. I always loved pornography. I took my birthday money when I turned 18 because I was now legal and went to the adult bookstore and bought pornography. I went along through some other jobs, but I always sexualized them, so finding pornography was just right. I'm the editor of Jugs, Leg Show, and Bust Out right now. I was also the creator of Big Butt magazine. We've arranged with Robert to do a photo shoot today, which will appear in Leg Show magazine. We're going to have 4 or 5 women who we think Robert will like, but there's never any telling with Robert Crumb. Here's a girl I wish I could have gotten for the Crumb shoot. This is a mother-daughter dominance team from out in L.A. Mother taught me to smother. It's this girl's motto. We're doing this for the Christmas issue. Mother's wearing a little red outfit. As you can see, we wanted them to do something festive.
He's definitely the person that would rather be a brain in a jar than a person in a body. It's like, so basically we both focus on my body sexually.
Robert's not too oriented towards normal sex, so there wasn't much in the way of normal sex in our relationship, but lots of piggyback rides and wrestling around, and he liked to sit on my shoe a lot.
He never takes his shirt off. He just likes to sort of like, not exist.
Robert is an admitted compulsive masturbator. He masturbates 4 or 5 times a day. He has told me that he masturbates to his own comics.
I'm sure Picasso did. I think probably, yeah, I think probably some do. But I don't think that many artists give you such a wide range of masturbatory possibility as Crumb, you know. That is, if you like what he likes. Does he actually do that?
Robert doesn't exaggerate anything in his comics. The women are exactly the way he wants them, and he really accurately portrays himself as the skinny, bad posture, myopic man he is. Some people wonder if he doesn't exaggerate the size of his penis, which always appears awfully big in the comics. Robert does not exaggerate anything. He is endowed with one of the biggest penises in the world.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of books in the early 70s that were really self-deprecating. My self-hatred was really intense then. Did you ever see this one? This one's Twisted Sisters. Oh. Nice cover. I show myself on the toilet. We got no recognition. Nobody bought it. I asked the publisher, you know, how it was doing, and he said he was using it for insulation in the walls of his barn.
What's the gist of your comics? What are they like?
It's all about me. My sex life, my phobias, you know, what a disgusting human being I think I am. And, you know, I hope...
But your mother's featured in them a lot, too.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the way I can tolerate my mother is by drawing really hideous drawings of her. Like this, for example. This was after Sophie was born. My mother came to visit me, and she was so irritating and so unhelpful. And she talks about how she couldn't hold the baby because she had just had her nails wrapped. My mother yells really loud in the restaurant, "Got any sweet and low, dear?" Real quiet sort of fern bar restaurant in San Francisco, and every single person turned around to look, you know. She came to the airport with an afro, dressed up to the minute in this completely trendy outfit. And Robert and I looked like immigrants just off the boat.
Is your father there in the middle and the bottom?
That's my mother's husband, yeah. She had him dressed in a leisure suit. When she first met him, he used to wear like baggy brown suits, and he had like short hair, and he was kind of fat. And she put him on a diet and put him in like safari outfits and made him grow his sideburns, but he was still real jalopy, so he had like real jalopy posture and everything, but he was real trendily dressed. Gonna follow along after her like that.
What does she think about your comics?
She doesn't see them. She's not interested.
Asked to see them? She doesn't know you're a cartoonist?
Somehow unconsciously she must know that there's something she doesn't want to know about. And the other thing is that she doesn't really take in very much about anybody.
A lot of my recent works appear in this weirdo magazine. These are the kind of guys who read my work. It's kind of an ode to the weirdo reader there, the hurt, sensitive kind of guy who doesn't fit in with the normal people. And these people back here, she's saying, I always hated the Three Stooges. Of course, he loves the Three Stooges. The first issue of Zap Comics that I did in late 1967 was like, you know, beginning of all this underground comic nonsense. It was all very LSD inspired, and a lot of these are things I read from sketchbooks. This white man character. A lot of this stuff I didn't realize when I was doing it what it was really about, or, you know, what it was connected to in my mind, and I realized afterwards this is really about my father. Rigid kind of gung-ho American kind of a guy, but you know, it's a typical World War II generation man. When my father died in '82, my aunt gave me all this stuff that my father had sent her over the years, and one of the things was this book that he wrote, Training People Effectively. See, I'm not sure what he did for a living in the last years of his life. It had something to do with, you know, employee motivation for this corporation that he worked for. It's a photo. This is what I was reading recently about this syndrome in Japan now that Japanese businessmen have. It's something about some smiling disease, or they have this like fixed smile on their face all the time. And I think my father had that, and the article said it was a sign of deep depression. He didn't smile when he was home. The smile dropped as soon as he came home. He's a grim guy. He fought in the war and everything, and just had a real hard-ass attitude about life, and was thought that my mother was mollycoddling all of us, which she was, and all three of his sons ended up being wimpy, nerdy weirdos. It kind of broke his heart. I think he wanted at least one of us to become a Marine. My father was real hot-headed, and he'd just blow his stack and just lash out and just hit you real hard. When I was 5 years old on Christmas, this whole thing happened where he blew his stack at me, and that's when he busted my collarbone.
When you were 5?
Yeah. Charles had a penchant for getting in trouble. It was very diabolical as a kid, and my father would beat him unmercifully for these things that he was always these crimes he was always committing, and it just made him worse, I think. The story in here I had the most trouble with is this one, A Bitch in Bod. I got 2 pages into it, and I thought, oh, this is too negative, it's too twisted, it's too upsetting, I gotta stop this. So I quit working on it, and I threw the pages in the garbage can. And at some point, Aileen came into my studio for something, and I decided, well, I'll show her this and see what she thinks about it. So I pulled them out of the garbage can. I said, Aileen, this thing, what do you think about this? I threw it away. I decided I want to continue with it. It's just too weird. It's just too disturbing. She read it and said, you have to finish this. You just have to do it. Obviously, you got to see this through. I said, well, okay, she's a woman. She said, I have to do it, so I'll do it. So Flaky Food answers the door, and there's this girl's body staying there, but what you see is Mr. Natural's head and his beard over the front of her where her head should be. That's how it starts. Flaky Food, he's very confused by that. And Mr. Natural comes galloping in, riding the girl around the room, and her body's very frisky, and you don't see her head at all. You just see Mr. Natural's beard over where her head should be. So then she lands in a split, and Mr. Natural starts talking about what an amazing body this woman has, but the head was always a problem because she had such an obnoxious personality. Flaky Food is shocked and horrified when he sees that she actually doesn't have a head. And Mr. Natural explains, well, let's face it, she was obnoxious, so I just got rid of the head. And then you always wanted her, you always lusted after her, and now you can have her because her head's missing. So then he starts explaining how took the head off and topped the neck with this little cap. And that Mr. Natural says he found out, he discovered that that she had a second smaller brain in her butt. And that's what's making the body function. And then he gives Food directions on how to feed her. You take this cap off and you put this funnel down her neck. And Mr. Natural pulls out this mannequin head and says, if you take her outside, you got to put this head on her so people aren't shocked and horrified by a headless girl walking around. And then Mr. Natural leaves and says, don't say I never did anything for you. He gives the girl to Food. And Food's kind of getting excited. He's got this frisky, wondrous girl body all to himself to do with whatever he wants. And he says, I like it better with just the cap. He knocks the fake head off. He's leading her over to the wall, and she accidentally steps on the fake head and smashes it. He pushes her against the wall, pulls her clothes off. He's admiring her firm and solid butt. This is the part where I get excited when I'm working on it. I really enjoy drawing the female form. I always make a lot of fuss and bother to make sure the figure comes out just the way I want it. The male side, I don't care what they look like that much. So he starts to fuck her. Here he penetrates her from behind, and he's getting really excited. And at the same time, he feels somewhat guilty. And then while he's in the middle of coming, he imagines her severed head and then her face condemning him. She says, you little shit. Cut to Mr. Natural. He's home. Phone's ringing. He's saying, well, got home about an hour ago. Yep, it's phoned. Yep, he's feeling guilty. Food wants to bring her back over. He wants to get rid of her. He can't handle it. So Mr. Natural says, okay, bring her over. He says, make sure you put the head back on before you take her outside. So he goes to get the head, and he realizes it's been smashed. He doesn't know what to do. Actually, a lot of these poses in these panels I took from freeze framing the Fly Girls on Living Color. So he ties up a T-shirt into a ball and puts it on top of the cap, and then he puts the hat on. He pushes her in the car. And we cut to Mr. Natural's house. Mr. Natural's saying he's going to regret it if he doesn't keep her. But Mr. Natural says, all right, forget it. We'll put the head back. Mr. Natural unscrews the clamp, pulls this pipe out of her. And he reaches in there. This is probably the most sickening, disturbing panel in the whole story. That's what Aileen said. This is the most disturbing part of the whole thing. So he's pulling real hard, and he pulls her head back out by her tongue. Her head was actually inside her body all the time. Again, Funt is very shocked, but then he's relieved that her head is back. Mr. Natural says, yeah, old African witch doctor stuff, nothing special. And she says, that was so weird. Mr. Natural says, yep. And they both realize, yep, the head's back, the trouble's back. She says, what happened to her, and what did Mr. Natural do to her, and where does he get his crazy ideas? At this point, Funty feels so guilty, he starts apologizing to the Doe girl for having, done the deed to her when she didn't have her head. And she says, what are you saying? And she suddenly realizes that Mr. Natural had handed her over to Funt for him to play with. And she says, you gave me to that schmuck to play with, as if I was a piece of meat. He says, what the hell's the difference? So he tries to get away, and she's chasing him. And in the end, she's raging with anger, and she says, where's a butcher knife? I'm going to cut both your heads off. Typical comic book ending.
I see a theme running through his work that is very frightening, and it's the woman with her head either cut off or somehow distorted, something done to it so that nothing is left with but the body, and the body, of course, you can have sex with.
When, for instance, Crumb draws that little monster, Mr. Natural, doing things that you or I would not normally contemplate doing with a headless woman, it is not intended, I imagine, to be sort of apologia for beheading or an apologia for rape or anything like that. No, but it is an acknowledgement that these kinds of fantasy actually do dwell in Homo sapiens. They're there.
I'm saying that it's very irresponsible to put dangerous sexual fantasies on paper and make them available to the public.
It's important for women to not just run in horror from pornographic images and immediately think that they represent, oppression and the power of men to degrade women, and to think sometimes about the fact that they often are their fantasies of having power, their fantasies of being able to dominate, that come out of a fear of precisely the opposite, fear of not being able to be attractive to women, impotence fears, and fears of powerlessness in general.
How do you feel about the way he depicts women in his comics?
Well, it just depicts his id in its pure form. I think, the dark side of human nature is in every person. That's what I was drawn to in his work to begin with, that he just really could illustrate that really clearly. It's really unusual to see it. I think it's always there,
Does any of that bother you?
No, he's not like that in other ways. As a person, he gets it out in his artwork. I mean,
he fools around with other women. How do you deal with that?
I fool around with other men.
I have these hostilities toward women, I admit it. It's out in the open. I have to put it out there, And sometimes I think it's a mistake, and I think I should never have let it out. I'd be, more well-loved, and it'd be just, the whole thing would be a lot simpler, easier, and cleaner if I didn't let it out. But it's in there, and it's very strong, and it ruthlessly forces itself out of me onto the paper, for better or worse.
When I was about 9 or 10, my brother used to collect Zap comics. And when I saw those, they really deeply terrified me.
Oh.
I was deeply upset, and I looked at them and thought, on some level, this is adulthood, this is what adult women are, this is what I grew up into, and it was horrifying.
Oh my God.
And I wonder if you think about the effect on people who read it, or what you're validating for boys, or...
I just hope that somehow revealing that truth about myself is somehow helpful. I don't know. I just hope that it is, but I have to do it. Maybe I shouldn't be allowed. Maybe I should be locked up and my pencil's taken away from me. I just don't know. I really can't say, I can't defend myself. And, it's like my daughter Sophie was watching Goodfellas, we got a videotape of it. And the violent part horrified her so deeply she started getting a stomachache, and I shut it off, wouldn't let her watch it. Although I think it's a great movie, truthful movie. I got a lot out of seeing it. It's obviously not for a kid,
And sometimes, certain harsh realities of life are, you got to kind of protect your kids a little bit from that. They don't understand a lot of things yet, Not everything's for children, not everything's for everybody,
Have you gotten criticism about the way you sometimes draw black people?
Oh, yeah. But it all came from white liberals.
Here's an example of the kind of thing I'm talking about in Ooga Booga. It's actually a mockery of black people, and it's a sort of a vomiting up of Crumb's own racism, his own deepest hostilities and fears.
Of course, if you have a knee-jerk reaction, and that's as far as you get, then you say, he's a racist. But once you start thinking about how he's toying with that, how he's shoving it in your face, you start to think about your attitudes, and you start to think about the stereotypes, how they came about. It gets very complicated.
All this stuff I did in the late 60s, I didn't really know what it was about when I did it. It was all very instinctive. Somehow the LSD liberated me in this way that allowed me to just put it down, not worry about what it meant. I had some vague idea that it meant something, but it's only later that I look at it and kind of analyze it and see what it's about, And it's just somehow the term nigger hearts just came into my mind as a product, It's like it's some black, deep thing in American, collective mind or something that has to do with turning everything over for a buck. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly, but it's a message like that.
Quite a number of people these days would like this sort of nice, milky vision of culture in which it's all rather improving and leads us all towards this sort of nice little pie-in-the-sky moral heaven where nobody does it, nobody's nasty to anybody else. But the only thing is that, literature, culture, art isn't put there in order to have that pleasant normative effect. I mean, conservatives like to think that great works of art lead us towards democracy. Bull, I mean, Shakespeare, there are speeches in Shakespeare that are so full of hatred for the mob. They're passionately elitist, passionately anti-democratic. What do you do with somebody like Céline, who was a Nazi sympathizer, but at the same time a great novelist? What do you do with practically anybody who's got a vision of the world that doesn't accord with the present standards at Berkeley?